So ladies and gentlemen, my name is Dr. Jameson Chase. I'm a professor here at Salve Regina University in biology. I'm also the chair of the Interdisciplinary Department of Cultural, Environmental, and Global Studies. 20 years ago, a book swept national security circles for its insightful description of the challenges facing the United States in an era of extremism. The book became a bestseller. And it cemented our next speaker as a geostrategist working in the tradition of the grand narrative. His new book, which I just got signed, America's New Map, captures the central challenges of this conference, exploring the twin challenges of climate change and demographic collapse. So please help me welcome Dr. Thomas P.M. Barnet.
It's great to be back in Rhode Island. I was a professor at the Naval War College for 7 years. Our third child was born at Women and Infants. He still has a rather crotchety, ornery personality, which I associate with the island. This is going to be a fast brief with a lot of material. Everything that I'm going to show you is in the book, all the artwork, everything. And you can have all of it tomorrow in either PDF or JPEG form. Just come to my Substack. It'll all be there. So please don't take pictures during, pictures of slides. That kind of drives me nuts. Okay? This is based on the book. I'm going to give you the bottom line up front. Our story starts with U.S.-style globalization, born of American ambition. After World War II, we wanted to take the rule set that made us such a strong economic power and project it upon the world. We were enormously successful, but it created three huge outcomes. First, climate change, the mother of all externalities. Second, demographic transition, the price of admission to global value chains. Third, the birthing of a majority global middle class, foretold by no one in my entire life. All predictions were only haves and then many more have-nots. When in truth, up about 60% of the global population now can be classified as middle income. So huge changes. These three changes, any one of which, in my mind, would establish a new world order in many ways. We got all three of them going on at the same time. I'm going to argue in this brief that they all compel, because of how they differentially impact the global north versus the global south, they all compel north-south integration. That dovetails with a regionalization imperative that's been going on inside the global economy the last 10 years or so, mostly in response to the fact that Asia is now risen. It no longer has the cheaper labor in China. It no longer makes sense to send everything to China and bring it all back assembled. This middle class, especially, superpowers will compete to influence it. Why? Because that's the future of growth in the global economy. And because wiring up all those people in an age of 5G and the Internet of Things and the AI of things, and AI in general, that's a huge prize. 2 billion souls coming online, middle class, next 20 years, and we're competing for their attention. We're competing for their subscriptions, their loyalty, their emulation. So I'm talking about a 5-decade period between now and roughly 2075 when these things are going to play out. Climate change is baked in. Nothing we're going to do is going to stop what's going to happen in the next 50 years. We're tempering things beyond 2075. We'll top out as a species, population growth-wise, around 2070, 75. That global middle class will have found itself and either learned how to rule itself or will submit to rule from either the left or the right. Scientists tell us species the world over are being asked to evolve at 10,000 times normal speed. Okay? You do 2 or 3 times faster normal speed in politics, and you've got a revolution. So nobody going into that black box is going to come out looking the same on the far side. And I mean the nature of family, the nature of life, the nature of work-life balance, capitalism, communities, companies, governments, democracy. It's all going to change quite dramatically. So it's an amazing time to be alive. I describe this process, how I look at the world, as broad framing. It's about taking a view deep into the future, and it's about thinking about the intersectionality of domains. Climate change is in of itself interesting. What it does to the economy, more interesting. What it does to politics, more interesting. What it does to security, more interesting. I'm going to tell this story in 6 parts. The first part is how we built this global order. Okay, we took the internal rule set of how our then 48 member states knitted together and created this economic behemoth, and we encouraged the world to emulate us. Absolute free trade, we pushed it. Just like California can do whatever it wants with Florida and vice versa. We pushed that mindset and we triggered all this change. We literally, not figuratively, we literally remade the planet, made it much hotter, changed the oceans, changed the atmosphere, changed the surface, changed everything. So we unleashed this monster. It went around the world and created all this good, but created all this impact. And in the last 10 to 15 years, we've disavowed it. It is Frankenstein's monster to us. We don't want any credit for it. We don't want any blame. But the world still holds us responsible because we are responsible. Your identity as an American is the most important identity any of us will ever have, because how we behave individually and collectively changes the world, bends history. This is my favorite map of the United States. I'm going to give you countries that equal the GDP of the state in question. I'm going to note how much bigger the population is. India's economy, one of the top 5 in the world, is the size of California. It takes 36 times more people in India to make the same economic activity happen in California. Here's how it looks across the rest of the country. If you added this all up, it would be about 2.4 billion souls. How do we make all this stuff happen with 335 million people? It's that amazing rule set, that wide open rule set that we chose to replicate across the planet. We are, in effect, the world's oldest, most successful multinational republic. We got our euro, our single currency, in 1863. So we're way ahead of the Europeans in this. We just don't think of ourselves along these lines until, Texas does something really weird and we realize that's not Massachusetts. And it sure as hell isn't Wisconsin. Every time we have an election, we're reminded how different our 50 member states are. We are globalization in miniature. We are the avatar. We've been doing it longer, faster, harder, more efficiently than anybody in the world. So nobody could teach us really anything about it because we're the furthest out on the edge. Our experiment is not just an American experiment, it's a worldwide experiment. Our version of globalization comes with rules, but no ruler. We purposely sought to create multipolarity over time. We have succeeded, and it's all come about peacefully. No great power war since 1945. But now that we got what we were looking for all these years, frankly, it scares the hell out of us because we're no longer in charge like we used to. And if it's not a unipolar world, then it's a G0 or G umpty squat world, meaning it's all out of control because we're not in charge. We have a lot of trouble sharing control in the system. Second point, climate change and what it's going to do to our perspective. This is the number one concept of the book. We're going from an east-west world to a north-south world. Think of your Jared Diamond, guns, germs, and steel. Why did the wide parts of the world develop faster and conquer the tall parts, because of the environmental sameness here that allowed development to proceed and be replicated rapidly. You don't have that same distribution over here. It's all different in terms of latitudes. So up to now in history, wide beats tall. Climate change flips that logic on its head. Now it's a lot better to be tall than it is wide. Do you know why? The suffering along here is going to be immense. When you take it over to our neck of the woods, that's the thinnest part of our neighborhood, and we're spread from pole to pole. Now we have less exposure and more built-in relief factor. So I'm talking about viewing the world increasingly in north-south terms, and that's why I divide it west, center, and east. Because the pain we're going to feel in North America isn't going to come from Africa. It's going to come from Latin America. Look at the world, 30 degrees north and south of the equator. I call it Middle Earth. That in general, and this cuts right along, it's right along Phoenix, right along the southern part of the United States, takes off most of Florida. Okay? This part of the world is going to experience increasingly, as the norm, temperature ranges, precipitation that equate to the Saharan Desert. Saharan Desert, pretty damn empty because it's really hard to live there. No good governments either. So people are going to be put on the move because it's going to be that much harder to live at lower latitudes. Scientists have been tracking for a while all species moving up in elevation every year systematically all over the world and poleward. A couple of kilometers a year. All of them. Why are they doing this? Climate is shifting. Climate is being squeezed out of the lower latitudes and shoved upward toward the poles. And all those plants and all those species are simply moving in response to maintain their access to an environment they recognize and that they're built for. Most of them are going to fail. We're living through the 6th great mass extinction period in planetary history. Those that can move will. They'll show up in your backyard when they shouldn't because they've never been there before. 2 Australia's worth of livable land is going to disappear across my Middle Earth. Gone. About 10% of the landmass outside of Antarctica. And then we look to the new north and all the changes that are going on there. Well, those 2 Australias I just took from Middle Earth, they're moving up here. Biggest real estate transaction in human history. No money changes hands. Total ripoff. The people who need land as elemental wealth are having it taken away, and the ones who caused climate change are cashing in. Completely unfair. Let's talk about the migration problem that's going to result from this. Let's game it out. The North looks at it in terms of what it's going to cost me. How much is this going to cost? The South looks in terms of risk and need. What will drive me to walk 1,000 miles towards the US border with my children? The goal here is pretty obvious. Live in impact, boost resilience. Historically, we do that with official development aid, assistance, almost always too little, and with foreign direct investment, typically too late. Private money wants certainty, and Middle Earth is not going to feature certainty going forward. Governments are going to fail at an unusual rate within this band. They will be considered threats by northern countries already. We call them all sorts of names when they come here. Murderers, rapists, terrorists, everything. We throw everything at them because they're ruining us, poisoning our blood. The question any migrant down there faces is, can I stay or should I go? It's not going to be possible to farm in most of these places. They're going to go to the city. Then they're going to become subject to the informal economy, maybe gangs like M13. Maybe that'll send them north. But if you think M13 is the problem, you're just seeing a symptom. The problem is it's going to be harder and harder to sustain farming, agriculture, rural life in these parts of the world. So they may go a country over, but a bunch of them are coming this way. And once they come this way, we have a choice. We either resettle or we repel. A few years back, Saudi forces massacred about 1,000 Ethiopian immigrants escaping famine, coming across the Yemen border. Just murdered them en masse. It was like an Einsatzgruppen action right out of World War II. Scary, scary stuff. The Italians let a ship full of migrants sink in the Mediterranean. 200, 250 souls, just watched them sink into the Med. The EU, the New York Times discovered, has been secretly funneling about $500 million, euros, to North African countries, governments, to intercept migrants, take them out in the middle of the Sahara, and dump them, which is right out of Dune, the movie. Let the desert kill them. This is already happening. We need a whole of government soft power response. Ultimately, the answer is going to be offering accession to larger north-south unions. We're going to socialize the latitudinal risk. We cannot build a wall high enough. When we do this, we create more certainty for FDI to flow. We attack threats at the source. We maximize the staying population. Many are still going to come, but we have to maximize what we can to stay. And there's always going to be the desire to deny outsiders to come in and organize your neighborhood instead of you doing it. That's the Monroe Doctrine for us. Because you know what? The Chinese will come in and take all the minerals, take all the food, and if what's left over is a devastated society freaking out, going into migration, they won't be coming to China. So they won't care. They're perfectly fine beggaring our neighbors. This is why I think in terms of those two red lines. Europe's not going to care about the Rio Grande. America's not going to care about the Med. Now let's talk demographics, because this really creates momentum in a one-way direction that cannot be altered. Balancing fewer and fewer babies with more and more old people, hard. South Korea is really straining. Japan is straining. Italy, Greece, straining. This is the concept of the demographic dividend. This is pre-modern, high death, high birth rate. This is modern, low birth, low death rate. For you movie lovers, this is basically Soylent Green. We got so many people, we got to eat them. Go back and watch the movie, though. At the beginning, they say it's because global warming is killing agriculture. Yeah, first climate change movie. Now, in my short lifetime, we've gone from so many people we got to eat them to where have all the babies gone? Children of Men, great movie, P.D. James. All the Handmaid's Tale, all that stuff, same anxiety. And you'll say, wow, that's fantastic. Except they're not having babies in Japan. They're closing schools all over the place. So these things are happening all around us. The transition from pre-modern to modern, that is what is known as the demographic transition. How does it happen? People move from rural to urban, and they start realizing they don't need to have so many babies because more of them make it to age 5. That's almost all due to vaccines. Eventually, they catch on, they start having fewer babies. But it takes a while, a generation, and then you get this abnormal chunk, this natural increase, this one-time only offer. When it first happens, yay, baby boom, who doesn't like babies? Then they turn into teenagers, and it's hell on earth. It's America in the 1960s. Then you got a demographic dividend. Lots of workers relative to old people and young people. Fantastic. You got to link up to global value chains then. That's your ticket. That's your price of admission. Because you know what happens? You stockpile elders from there on. Here's an example of it. South Korea, 1950. We call these age pyramids because that's how they're usually shaped. Lots of babies and then thinned out as you go higher because, packs of wolves hunt down the older ones and thin the herd. Except we're completely beyond nature, so we live. Here's South Korea. You can see the bulge begin. This is when they really kick in. The diamond. Everybody loves this shape. Hold it as much as you can. And you know what? America keeps an artificial diamond shape by bringing in workers, working age, immigrants. We cheat by letting in all these workers. A permanent demographic dividend we get, which of course we demonize and want to shut off because we're stupid. Nobody knows what this looks like. This is queer as hell. This is weird. It does not exist in history. It should not be possible. It is a wobbly, spinning top. We have no idea how governments work at this level, other than you better get a lot of immigrants or some really talented robots. I'm going to tell you the history of globalization is who's got the demographic dividend. We had it after World War II. The Japanese had a 30-year population growth. We were going to rule the world forever. Then the Japanese were going to rule the world forever. When I went to Washington in 1990, they were like, read Michael Crichton. Japanese are going to take over the world. We're going to war with Japan. That was the big thing. And then they got old. The Chinese come along with a bigger demographic dividend, about 300 million. They were going to rule forever. They had conquered capitalism in a way none of us could understand. And then they started getting old. Now the money goes to Southeast Asia. Next up, India, 500 million. Beyond that, Africa and the Middle East, 1 billion youth. So mid-century youth culture in this world, African-centric. If you're a business person and you're not thinking along those lines, all that brand loyalty out there to be captured, you're missing the boat. That global middle class that I described, it's only 2 billion in the year 2000. It's 4 billion now. It will be 6 billion mid-century. That is a lot of brand loyalty. That is a lot of economic activity. Imagine all the big data associated with all that consumption and production. You want the most powerful AI in the world? You better get access to all this because that's what's going to drive it. Think about all the geopolitical orphans that are going to be created by climate change, failed governments, that sort of stuff. People put on the move. It's basically free agency. Go live where you want. Sign with whatever franchise will take you. We have, in effect, 5 big franchises. My notion is think about this in terms of global free agency and what it takes as a brand to grow as opposed to lose, to get smaller, because somebody's getting much bigger over the course of the next 50 years. Now, if you have to have white Christian nationalism and close the border, well then, good luck to you. You're heading straight towards the dreamland known as North Korea. If you're not getting bigger in this world, you're not getting better, because you're going to be suffering more. Europe has a hell of an attractive model. Their model is so attractive, the Russians have to invade neighbors to stop them from leaving, like some abusive ex. The EU has been growing throughout time. Can you imagine the EU with more member states than the United States? No, we're sticking with 50. Putin's got an integration model. It's right out of the 19th century. He basically goes over the border and takes hostages. He freezes the conflict, That denies the country in question from joining either the EU or NATO. It's brutal. And he's busy. So that's Europe, great model. Russia, not so great. Now let's talk about the Chinese, because how we view this contest determines how we play. Americans, very mercantile, okay? We love the economic negotiation that is poker. How bad do you want that money? How bad? Okay? We're playing that game right now in Ukraine. Russia's going to do this. How about this missile system? How about this other missile system? How about this new other capability? And we keep daring the Russians to keep playing it up. The Russians are playing chess, though. Putin only cares about his important pieces. Pawns, he's got them ad infinitum. Their famous meat wave attacks, where they just run across the field and let you shoot them. China plays a very different game. If you don't understand it, you should really try it sometime. It's called Go. It is very imperial. It rewards focus. They are laying stones down on a global Go board every day, all over the planet. Meanwhile, we're freaking out over Ukraine. We're freaking out over Taiwan. Have you gotten the calendar invite yet for the war with China over Taiwan? Because I said yes, I accepted. Turns out it's 2027, which is fabulous. Can't wait. All different perspectives, which means we don't see the game the Chinese are actually playing. They are literally cementing the global south in networks. They're going everywhere we sanction. Show me a country we sanction, the Chinese are there, making all sorts of offers. And frankly, this is a great thing. The last in, as an integrated force within the global economy, needs to integrate the next up. So China is exactly doing what it should be doing. It's just that they have ulterior motives in a lot of this. They come in and say, you know what, we'll do all the infrastructure. Hell, we'll throw in the 5G. You want a lot of Huawei phones? We'll give them to you. We'll give you the routers. We'll do it all. And then we'll leave back doors for everything. And we'll basically turn you into a surveillance subsidiary of the Chinese government. And then you'll start noticing that we're arresting people on your shore and that we have secret police stations inside your borders. Because that's their level of paranoia about threats to the Communist Party rule. So Huawei, 5G, it's all Trojan horse for them. They ultimately want to get a hold of, build and get a hold of the Internet of Things, and on that basis, the AI of things. Because they see that as the way forward. But what about Taiwan? This guy's talking about the third world or the global south, when the real story is, we're going to go to war with Taiwan. I'm going to offer a different perspective on where I think warfare is going. I think we're witnessing a military version of the Singularity, okay? As the absolute utility of cyber, drones, robots, AI keep going up, the utility of actual ground forces and platforms in general are going down. Good example, the Russians moved their Black Sea fleet to the other side of the Black Sea away from Ukraine because the battle space got too dangerous for them. The Russians are afraid to send tanks over without extra armor, which is absolutely hilarious, because it's too dangerous for tanks. The Ukrainians kill Russians mustering outside of their barracks because they track all the cell phone numbers, see two lines, send a drone and kill them on the spot. Those 3 guys we lost in Syria, I think it was, they got them in their bed. This battle space has become too dangerous for troops. When that happens, you're at the military singularity. It is supremely asymmetrical. When I worked in the Office of Force Transformation, Art Zabrowski, our motto was, paraphrasing the Marines, the many, the cheap, the disposable, the unmanned. Before the Naval War College fired me in early 2005, because I was so associated with Zabrowski, I gave a talk one time, all hands, and I said, listen, good news is You're going to command dozens, nay, hundreds, nay, thousands of naval platforms in your career. That's the good news. The bad news is none of them are going to have anybody on them. Okay, you say that in 2005, they're going to fire your ass. You go to Ukraine now, half the killing is done by drones. Half the killing. In another 5 years, it could be 100% of the killing. And when that happens, we leave human-centric warfare. And you may have seen this video online. It's pretty pathetic. Drone comes up to this guy. He's a Russian. And he points to his comrades off to the side. Drone goes over, kills his comrades. This guy doesn't have a better thought in his mind in the meantime. Then the drone comes back to him, and he begs before the drone kills him, executes him. Not really, I don't know, honorable war or whatever you want to call it. It's just drones killing humans. We are leaving behind the world in which you can capture area. We are seeing in Russia and Ukraine basically a rerun of World War I. We got trench warfare, for God's sakes. What you can create in this kind of conflict is not anything of value. I can deny your win. You can deny my win. Neither of us can win. And we can just keep building these robots and throwing them at each other in faster and faster numbers like some sort of Transformer movie. But what the hell is the point? We are seeing the pointlessness. We are seeing the capping of conventional warfare in our lifetimes, which I think is absolutely fabulous. Just like nukes capped off great power war, AI's coming along, the Terminator's coming along to terminate the utility of conventional warfare. What's left when you don't have anything? What's left is cyber. That's why what China is doing around the world matters. I call China's approach its quantum grand strategy. What if grand strategy is not about the big pieces? It's not about conquering the heartland or the fulcrum of Europe or Africa, the race for Africa. What if it's about stealing citizens from opposing countries? You would operate subnationally. You would seek to get inside their identity nucleus, split it, transmute their allegiance. At every step of the way, how they interact and communicate, how they transact with the world, how they consume media, the worldview that results. It's easy because you can get it all through their smartphone. You access their soul, so to speak. And once you're inside, you start sucking all that big data, pushing it into your AI predictive machinery, and you're anticipating their every need. It's not just Amazon saying, do you want to buy some more dog food? It's all sorts of stuff. Because this system in the United States, this is a competitive space. Google doesn't work with Amazon. They compete. But in China, these all work together. Their goal is to get you to police your own behavior according to your number, your social credit score. Behave well, your number goes up, life's good. Behave not so well, your number goes down. Other people's lives are good, but not yours. Pretty soon, they don't have to send the cops to check on your behavior. You just see your score go up or down. That's scary. This is what they're selling all over the world. And business is good. A lot of rightist governments, they want to join, they want to develop, they want to see their economies bloom. They also are scared of an emerging middle class and their demands for pluralism. Now let's talk India. We want India to help us box in China, which is a fool's errand. India needs China's trade and investment to get into those global value chains that China dominates. As China moves up the productive ladder, it needs to slot India in behind it. It needs to take advantage of all that cheap labor and all that consumption right next door. So the idea that we're going to talk the Indians into taking on the Chinese for us is nuts. And I was just over there in February at a big global business summit where Modi spoke. And all the businessmen will tell you that. We're not doing it. We're not interested in that package. And yet we place so much emphasis on it. But let me tell you why India matters. We are rerunning an experiment from the beginning of the 20th century when the West got its middle class. As soon as it did, everybody broke out in conflict over who was going to rule this new social, powerful class. The socialists wanted to rule from the left. The fascists wanted to rule from the right. We got all sorts of violence in the system for a very long time on that basis. We lucked out with a pair of Dutch, Theodore and Franklin Roosevelts. And we regraded our economic landscape in a progressive era. And progressive is not a dirty word. It's a very good word. And on that basis, we made our political system middle-class centric. We are rerunning this experiment on a global scale, much larger. And we have players. This guy's more trusted by a big chunk of the Republican Party right now than Joe Biden. So if you don't think you can body snatch people in this world, you're not paying attention. These guys offer a certain package. The one that should matter to us are the Indians. It stunned me when Modi got up in February in New Delhi and gave this speech, and he said, ours is a welfare state. Ours is a social welfare state. We care about the poor in our country. I thought, wow, you would never get elected saying anything like that in the United States. But that's the logic they're bringing to this time period. And it's absolutely essential. Now I'm going to tell you the good news. We're going to win. We're going to win because the West is the best. Okay? I'm going to give you a whole bunch of reasons why the West is the best. First, we are the most stable part of the world. Simple measure, border change events. Second, we got the beef. I know the Chinese are catching up. We're only as big as the next 9. This chart from 2 years earlier was the next 10, but the Chinese squeezed out somebody on the bottom. We're still doing okay. Here's the hidden advantage. Think about the 20th century, the century of oil, petrodollars. 21st century, century of water. Where's the version of water dollars? Because that's what they figured out how to do, was marketize and financialize a resource. And if we're smart, we'll do the same. Because you know what? We're 15% of humanity over here in the Western Hemisphere. We got 3 times as much water proportionally. Nobody else has water like we do. So big surprise, who's got food left over to feed the rest? There's what you grow, there's what you import, there's what you eat, there's what's left over. China's the biggest agricultural power in the world. Do you know what? It eats up everything it makes. And then it needs a whole lot more. It's the biggest importer in the world too. We are the OPEC of grain. This is 60% of the calories humanity eats. This is huge. In terms of the traditional concerns, energy, we don't really have any. We're energy independent. Same with lithium, same with all that stuff. There's really no strategic material we can't get our hands on in our neck of the woods. Fourth, we are ripe for nearshoring. Look at the 3 big manufacturing consumer hubs in the world. It's us, it's the Europeans, and it's East Asia. Europe is organized. 70% of its trade happens inside the country, the union, excuse me. Asia's already quite organized. After 3 decades of NAFTA, we're hardly organized even in North America. And our connectivity with Latin America is abysmal. It's like below 20%. The lowest hanging fruit, and we purposely ignore it, demonize it, feed it all sorts of weaponry, and fuel its violence with our demand for narcotics. We are the worst possible neighbor you could ever have. Really. The idea that they don't all hate us just immeasurably is beyond me. Next, if you're concerned about the mixing of the races, understand Amerindians mostly got wiped out to the tune of about 90%. Then, for half a millennia, everybody else from around the world came to the New World, and we spent the last 500 years intermixing and intermarrying. The Western Hemisphere today, 45% white. Whites as the majority minority. Can you believe that? Well, it's happening in the United States. And I would argue most of our political polarization right now hides its true origins in this underlying reality. It's because a big chunk of white America does not see an America of the future where it belongs. Just like a big chunk of America looks at the future of globalization and says, it doesn't look like me anymore. And they're right. The future of globalization is non-white, non-Christian, non-European, non-Western. If that scares the hell out of you, then put up a wall, white Christian nationalism, yeehaw. Truest sign that we were colonized in the past. Spot any indigenous languages? No, we speak European languages. We also were amazingly converted. We're the most religiously homogenous part of the world. 80% Christian, 60% Catholic. Sort of like our Supreme Court. Looking northward, we got the best neighbor possible. A better version of us, much better. They got the Russians, who suck. In terms of economic match, labor pool, age, much easier. You got the Europeans hitting on a much younger population down there. Kind of creepy European, but over here, pretty darn normal. They're coming over at working age. So we absorb them really quite easily. They're great for our economy. We got all sorts of measures that say they're great for our economy. In terms of political freedom, this is the one that always gets me. I'm always stunned at how democratic the Western Hemisphere is. We should be able to get along. And then we don't have anybody to really give us trouble in our neck of the woods. Europe's got to worry about the Russians, who are still falling apart, going all the way back to 1989, and the Chinese got to worry about rising India. Finally, we got the best brand in the world. The best. People will kill themselves trying to get here. They come from all over because the West is the best. I'm going to leave you with an America's First grand strategy. I want to focus on our neck of the woods. I don't want to focus it the way that Donald Trump wants to focus on it. I want to integrate it. I see huge value going forward. I see huge pain going forward. I'd rather rush toward it, meet it, deal with it. Because, I'll tell you, I got 6 kids. 2 millennials, 4 Gen Zs. None of them are signing up for your military to go somewhere and kill migrants coming across the border. Ain't gonna do it. They got very little interest in a war with China. They got very little interest in the Middle East. They are very concerned about climate change. If you don't give them something to do, you're gonna lose their devotion, their willingness to sacrifice, their identity. Countries fail all the time when their brand gets stale. It's like a really stale cereal on the shelf in the grocery store. Nobody buys it. Eventually they take it down. That's what happened to the Soviet Union. Poof, one day. So let me make this argument by the process of elimination. If you think we're going to out-integrate China and East Asia, I think you're high. Putin's done more to integrate Europe in the last 2 years than we did in the previous 6-7 decades. Nothing motivates like fear. We are not going to be the great integrator of the Middle East. The Persian Gulf monarchies, the Indians and the Chinese, who draw almost all of the oil out of there, they're going to be involved. We're not going to out-integrate these players across Africa. It's just not in our nature. It's not where we are economically. The one place in the world where it totally makes sense is the Western Hemisphere. And yet we treat it like trash and call it all sorts of names. I am the 7th generation of Barnets. Each of them before me got stars on their flag. Some got a lot. One got like 13. My favorite is Harry Barnet, born under Lincoln, dies under Truman. That is a lifespan. My grandfather got 5 stars. My dad got 2. I got bupkis. Nothing says we can't open up. Nothing says we can't go non-contiguous. We have stolen, bought, conquered, swindled. We've done it all in the past. And we're watching the Europeans bring in new members and get bigger and bigger and bigger. You know why Europeans' laws are so respected? Because they got the biggest damn market in the world. Bigger than ours. Okay? If you want to play at that level as India and China get big, it's not about closing the borders. It's not about hanging all sorts of tariffs on stuff. It's about getting bigger and getting better. That's been the answer throughout our history until very recently. And yeah, I blame the boomers, flat out. We only have so many politicians in the room right now, I'm assuming. I will tell you, I think the boomers have been the worst political generation of leadership we've ever had in this country. They have taken an America that was huge and they've made it small. The real talent in that generation after the 60s, after the failed revolution, it went into business and technology and transformed the world. And we got the leftovers in the political realm. And I got to tell you, it's starting to show. Thank God they're all nearing their expiration date. Vote early, vote often, vote young. That's my advice. I'll be happy to answer questions.
Not sure how funny or scared I am right now. We have time for questions, so please raise your hand. There are some microphones that will come around.
Surely I've insulted somebody.
Jim Moore, businessman and lived in Asia for a long time, Singapore, the best run country in the world. And it seems to me the United States has another secret weapon, which you kind of alluded to, and that is Japan, China, even Europe to a certain extent. Immigration is essentially impossible, culturally impossible.
Difficult.
And here, if you look at the top, I saw a number the other day of Fortune 500 companies, 40% of them are run by either immigrants or the children of immigrants. And so I would argue, but I'd like your view, that that's the only kind of fundamental secret advantage besides our democratic system that we have relative to these other giant systems.
It's a huge advantage, without a doubt. We attract the talent from all over the world, and they stay. My favorite analyst of American politics is a friend of mine. We went to Harvard together, Min Jingpei from China. He wrote an argument for foreign policy about 20 years ago. I cite it in the book. He said, everywhere else in the world, nationalism, backward looking. We're Turks because we all suffered the same damn thing. We're all Armenians because we suffered the same damn thing. Everybody has this collective same damn thing kind of mindset. Americans totally different. We're not nationalistic. We're patriotic. We focus on the future. We believe in the future. We're not interested in the past until very recently, when some of us want to go back to the 1950s of their youth and the Mad Men era, because that's when they felt more comfortable. But by and large, American patriotism has been very forward-looking. That is a huge attractor. Anybody who has real gumption, A-type personality, they come here, and then we intermarry. And we become even more A-type. It's powerful.
We have a student question from Brian.
Hello. Thank you, Dr. Chase. So this is actually the second time I'm watching your presentation. I took Dr. Ludis's class on modern global history last year. Very happy to have seen this presentation again, this time in person. My question is...
I don't think I got paid for that.
Oops. But anyway, my question is on the topic of the forum today. If there were to be a cataclysmic climate change event that were to happen,
That's interesting.
non-descriptive,
Yeah.
do you think that the world could unite together to fight together? Or
Yeah.
no?
From 2010 to 2015, I worked with an Israeli startup, and we pioneered this sort of massive online wargaming. Thousands of people around the world, these war games that go on for like days and days. And one of my favorite ones was the crystallizing global climate disaster that really locks everybody in. And I think we're waiting for that. The problem is there's competition out there. We're really much more attuned to this electronic Pearl Harbor version. And Americans are fascinated with bolts from the blue, you know, Pearl Harbor, 9/11, who sunk the Maine, that kind of stuff. We're very fixated on that kind of strike, even though we handle that stuff really well. It's the horizontal scenarios like the pandemic that we have a hard time with. If you just punch us in the face once, we're good to go. Okay, so I'm waiting for that punch in the United States, something that really harms. And, you know, we just watched Phoenix go 100 days over 100. Phoenix just said like 2 years ago, you can't grow Phoenix anymore. It's got to stop, you know. We're bumping into these things. My mortgage, PITI, went up $300 this year. And I was like, holy crap, how did that happen? Homeowners insurance in South Central Ohio. What's the concern? Well, tornadoes and all sorts of stuff. But people it's starting to arrive in their mailboxes. And I'm more convinced that the mailbox arrival is going to be more impactful than the crystallizing disaster, because we kind of like disasters. I mean, we go to the movies, we're always blowing up the White House in New York and all that kind of stuff. We're kind of a nerd to it. But man, you want to freak somebody out, raise their homeowner's insurance $5,000, $10,000 in a year. Because that's just devastating. People can't afford their houses. And that's why this housing crisis thing is kind of coming to fore, and you're starting to see this understanding about, you know, how can we keep incentivizing old people to go where it's not going to be safe for them anymore? Just doesn't make sense. There's a great website where you can go and put in a current location, and they'll show you what it's going to be like in 2075. We're leaving South Central Ohio. There's not a whole lot there. And we're moving back to the homeland of Green Bay, Wisconsin. So I looked up Green Bay. Where's it going to be in like 60 years? Turns out it's going to be in northern Oklahoma. So no domed stadium for Lambeau, because there's just no point. Can you imagine that kind of movement? Okay, you go to the lower latitudes and type in like Riyadh, and it just goes, no answer. They got nothing to base it on. They just go, it's like the devil sign and pointy stuff. You're just like, get out, get out. Okay, that is going to drive all sorts of stuff. You know, Al Gore said, look at how we're freaking out today over the immigration we got. Look what it's done to our political system. Now times it by 10 or 20 or 100, which is not inconceivable. There's going to be two types of people in the future, those put on the move by climate change and those forced to accept them or kill them. And there are plenty of us who are willing to kill. It's absolutely stunning. I don't think we've thought this through very well. I don't think we understand that the succeeding generations have zero interest in this future. Zero. All my kids are completely uninterested in it. Okay, so we got to speak to them, and that's why I wanted to write this book. It was to deal with these twin fears, these fears of white America, about an America they no longer recognize or see their future in, and then a larger America that looks to the global landscape and feels the same scary void. I look in the mirror and he's Chinese now, for God's sakes. That's really disturbing in a lifetime. I mean, this racial makeover and this whole globalization thing, it's happened in like 100-year period, which is a blink of an eye. And we're at some really big fulcrum points right now, which is why we keep having these momentous change elections. But we got to give young people something they can build, something they find attractive. Otherwise, we're not going to have an America, because my kids do not identify with this country much at all. And I look at them and I think, geez, your dad, I wrapped my book in a flag. I mean, how much more obvious could I get? Of course, I put 143 stars on my flag. Which is Gen Z code for I love you.
I think we could take one more question before we have to go out to the tent.
A very inspiring presentation. Thank you. Where does the global pandemic fit into your scenario?
It was basically an accelerant of all the things we saw and we're experiencing and moving towards. The re-regionalization, which we are casting as a FU to the world, basically, when what it really represents is, like I said before, it doesn't make sense to send everything to China and then bring it all back. The wage differential isn't there. China consumes most of what China makes. China's becoming insulated from the global economy and still trying to grow through export-driven growth, which is, they're going to have some real problems with that. But Xi Jinping is their problem, not ours. We have a hard time kind of moving from what was a market-making persona, okay? Distinguish between market maker and market player. Market player, Bill Belichick, coach, New England Patriots. Market maker, Roger Goodell, NFL commissioner. Okay, I care about the game. I care about winning. Couldn't care less about the game. Okay, after World War II, we aspired to be the market maker in the global system, and we did it for like 5-6 decades. We were selfless. We were amazing, and we just totally changed the world for the better. Nobody's done as much good as we have by not trying to hoard wealth and by spreading opportunity and doing all these things. Absolutely great. But it came to a point where the multipolarity kicked in, and now it's become pretty damn competitive out there. We wanted all these different powers peacefully rising. They've risen. And now when they do anything that's actually pretty natural, I got stuff coming in from all over the world. China says, I want to build a big navy. We're like, hey, you don't get a big navy because of that. So we're suspicious and we're kind of paranoid about everything. We have to shift and balance between our jerk towards market player meism that's started with Obama, torpedoed downward through the floor with Trump, rebounded a bit with Biden, but we're nowhere near market maker anymore. We're very much still we're in it for ourselves. And we need to regain that balance. Some sense of more like Europe, where we care about getting ahead, but we care about the system as a whole. We've abandoned that, and we need to find it. And I argue that you need a national project to get people to care along those lines. And that's why I see this expansion of the union as the big opportunity. And I'm completely serious in it. I think the Democrats could easily bring in District of Columbia as a 51st state. Once you do that, it's broken. Now anything's possible. Why can't we bring in Puerto Rico? It'd be the 13th biggest state overnight. Then the Republicans would be like, oh my God, I got to get myself some. Let's conquer Cuba and bring them in.
Help me thank Dr. Barnett, please, and